Hello, hello. Testing. All right. Hello, everybody. Hello. Would you repeat after me? Say forward together. Not one step back. Say it louder. Forward together. Not one step back. Say we is the most important word in the justice vocabulary. The issue is not what I can do, but what we can do when we stand together, when we pray together, when we struggle together, when we go to jail together, when we fight for right together. And so we are committed forward together, not one step back. Turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, are you ready for a poor people's campaign and a national call for a moral revival? If you are, put your hands together, put your hands together. Come on, put your hands together. Wow. I want to invite Dr. Theoharis, who's the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, and the co-director of Kairos. Would you welcome her tonight? Would you welcome her tonight? My name is Reverend Dr. William Barber, president of Theoharis of the Breach and also co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. You may be seated. I want to invite Ms. Laura Ashton, who's our organizer, to come right now with some very critical announcement. And let me welcome, are we already live? We are live across the United States, normally about. So give it up, Seattle, let them hear you, Seattle. All right. Now where's the sound person, where are you? All right, wherever you are, keep the mics going. We know how to modulate, but sometimes it's gonna get a little rowdy in here tonight. Because we are fighting for the heart and the soul of this democracy. Laura Ashton, give us our housekeeping.
Thank you, Reverend Barber. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to tell you that in this space, we love children. We believe that children are part of the movement today, and we love the sounds that they make, and they are welcome here with us in this room. However, we also know that sometimes parents like to be able to focus on the event, and sometimes that's difficult when you have kids. Yes. So we have across the hall some free childcare. We have our childcare provider, Ms. Asia in the back here. So if you have children, please, they have Play-Doh and drawing and snacks and other things to do. If you're interested, just have them go across the hall. They're free to come in and out as they please. Thank you. So, raise up your pledge card if you've got one. All right. Now put it down. Raise your hand if you don't have a pledge card. Okay. Volunteers? John, can you run outside and grab some of those volunteers who are passing out pledge cards? So keep your hand up, because tonight this is an organizing meeting. This is not just to hear some good speeches, although you're going to get that too, but this is about learning how you can take action, how you can become a part of a growing movement, and this pledge card is an essential piece of that.
Because good speaking is a part of organizing.
That's right.
Because if you're not organized, you don't have anything to speak about. But if you speak, you ought to be organized.
That is right. So another part of organizing is making sure that this message gets out farther than just this room. So right now we are live streaming. There are folks tuning in, not only in Washington, but also we have folks here from Alaska who are making sure their folk back home are hearing this, folk from Oregon who are making sure that their folk back home are hearing this. And we have people tuning in from all around the country and often all around the world. But we need your help to spread the word. So, who's got a phone? I guess, all right, I like it. A lot of y'all have a phone. It's surprising how phones out there. Get that out, and right now, I need you to get on your Facebook page, or I need you to get on your Twitter account, and I need you to let folks know I'm here at the hashtag Poor People's Campaign mass meeting, and you can tune in by going to the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for more revival Facebook page. I know that's a long name. If you just say a Poor People's Campaign Facebook page, they'll find it. Or you can say to the breachrepairs.org website. That's where we're live streaming to. www.breachrepairs.org. So they can go to the Poor People's Campaign Facebook page, or they can go directly to the website. Or you all could just go right now to that Facebook page and share it. That would be the easiest thing that you could do. If you feel like you're tech savvy in that way, you can get that done. I want to make sure you're using the hashtag Poor People's Campaign. I know we have a lot of friends right now watching on this live stream. I'm also speaking to you. We need you to be live tweeting this event. We need you to be using that hashtag. We want to make sure that folks all across the city, all across the state, all across this region are hearing that the Pacific Northwest is joining the Poor People's Campaign, and it is time to get ready.
The states are here. All the states.
So I'm going to call some states. I want you to holler if you're from that state. Alaska.
Yeah, all right.
I love it. Oregon.
Yeah, all right.
Washington State. All right. Did I miss any states? We got anyone else?
There's one state. Hawaii?
Rhode Island or?
Rhode Island?
All right, Rhode Island.
Who's from the state that knows that America needs a change in its state of mind?
Yeah, we got it.
All right, so we got this organized. We want you to hold your cards, get them filled out, go to those websites. Now, mass meeting, this is a mass meeting, and mass meetings always have a certain atmosphere. In mass meetings, we don't just sing just to be singing. It's not just any kind of music. But music draws us together. Music draws us together. So we want to, wait a minute, you took my program, y'all, Laura. You took my whole program off this. You give some people a little mic one time and they have. Wait, now, first of all, where's John that used to, come here, John. John was worked for me when in NAACP. We sent him out here to be a rabble rouser. So I'm glad to see Brother John. How many of y'all know Brother John? Reverend John. All right. So he's over there in the choir right now, right? Okay, God, I just wanted to do that embarrassing. All right, so we got the Total Experience Choir. We're going to switch it around. We want them to do one song. We're going to bring them back, but we want them to do one song right now and to begin to sing, and then I have something next that we're going to do after that. So let's welcome the Total Experience Choir at the mass meeting. I'm good. Y'all want to do it down there?
The mic's down there.
We'll get them down there.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get you the mic. That's easy. Who needs the mic?
I have a very tiny voice and you wouldn't be able to hear me without the mic.
We
know that.
Pat, here you go. Excuse me. Who else needs one?
Where there is
Unity.
you will find
Strength.
'cause
Unity makes strength.
unity
Unity makes strength.
want to tell you tonight, behold, how good and pleasant it is for all of God's people, for brothers to dwell together in unity, for brothers to dwell together in unity, brothers and sisters, for brothers to dwell together in unity, for brothers and sisters, for brothers to dwell together in unity. God, please give your people unity. God, please give your people unity. Right now is the time. Now is the time for all God's people to come together in unity. Now is the time for all God's people to come together in unity. Now is the time for all God's people to come together in unity. Now is the time for all God's people to come together in unity.
Now is the time.
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 Together in unity. For brothers to dwell together in unity. For brothers to dwell together in unity. God, please give your people
Come on and give it up. Come on and give it up for the Total Experience Choir. They're going to come back later on in the mass meeting. Let's give it up for them. Now, would everybody grab a hand? Grab a hand, grab a hand, grab a hand. Just hold it for a second, because it is time for unity. Black, white, brown, red, yellow, poor, wealthy, Republican, Democrat, gay, straight, young, old, to come together in a unity for justice and a unity for lifting up those on the margins and a unity for fighting for the very soul and the heart of our democracy in this world. There has to be a group of us who understand that we must be unified in our commitment to love and to justice and to truth. And we will not let hate and division have the stage without a moral challenge. While you're doing that, let us remember the people in Sutherland, Texas.
That's right.
And let us grieve for our nation's continued thirst too often for more weapons and and more instruments of destruction. Is Vanessa in the building tonight? We met a young lady, she may not have been able to get here on the plane, who said she was from that community. She is Native American, Latino individual, and she was praying for those communities. So let us bow for just a moment, because certainly if meanness can be unified, certainly goodness needs to be unified. If hate can be unified, certainly love must be unified. If liars can be unified, certainly truth must be unified. And if folk can be unified to do things that make people cry, we can be unified in our tears and our concern and our mourning for whenever members of the human family are hurt and killed and destroyed. So we pray for Sutherland and all of those families. And we pray that this nation will grieve to the point that it changes. Will grieve to the point that it changes. Shalom. We come tonight again for music, and I want to introduce you, and she can tell you who she is and all that. Miss Yara Allen, the theomusicology for the Moral Revival and repairers of the breach. I don't know what's getting ready to happen here, but I'm going to let her take over. Take this one. That's a better mic.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Oh, come on. Good evening. I saw you. Give it up for Total Experience. Right? So we see all this beautiful diversity up here. Isn't this beautiful? Because this is really what America looks like, right? But we're missing just a few people. And so I'm just going to ask very quickly, because we have to do this quickly. I'm going to ask, let's say 10 people to rush the stage. Okay, let's try this again. I'm going to ask 10 people to rush the stage. There we go. Can we have a representative from the Raging Grannies? The Raging Grannies in North Carolina told me that you can be here. So feel free to join us. There you go. Are there any tiny people, any young people? We're all young, now don't get us wrong. We're young. Okay, so now, here's the part where you all join in. And across the country, we call this the Justice Jump-Off Choir. So if you walk through those doors tonight, you came to choir rehearsal. We got you, that's right, we got you. So we're gonna ask that you stand, and our motto everywhere we go is that we stand together because we stand together.
Right.
And we're just going to sing a little bit together tonight, okay? Is that all right?
Yeah.
But before we do this, I tell people everywhere we go, I am not picking on you, but I just want to know who's in the room. So by show of hands, where are the altos? By show of hands, where are the sopranos? Tenors. Bass, baritone. And then for those of you who did not raise your hand, I have no idea. Raise your hands if you when you know it, one person said, I cannot sing, is right here, close up time. So we're going to ask him to join the choir. Give him a hand. You sit way in the back of the classroom and the teacher calls you, right? Okay. So the first little piece that we're going to do is a song that came from the original Poor People's Campaign, 1968. And it was written by Jimmy Collier. Raise your hands if you ever heard that name. Frederick Douglass Kirkpatrick. And the song is Everybody's Got a Right to Live. And we're just going to do the chorus part of that says, everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Y'all were supposed to say, woo! No, let me try that line again. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Because everybody's got a right to live. And it goes like this. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail because everybody's got a right to live. Do you have it? Do you have it? Now you notice that we don't have drums tonight, right? But I am so happy for wood floors. Okay, everybody hit the bass drum. That's it, all right? So, we're clapping. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. This campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live. Let's do it again. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right. Let me hear you do it this time. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. Before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to So we're at mass meeting now, 1967, 68, and we're singing this song. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. It's okay. It is. Don't panic. Everybody just take a deep breath. That was rehearsal, I get it. So the words are, woke up this morning with my mind. And the response to that is stayed on freedom. And we're still playing our drums, right? So we're going to get it right this time. Here we go. Woke up this morning with my mind. Stayed on freedom. You know, I woke up this morning with my mind. Stayed on freedom. I said I woke up this morning with my mind. Stayed on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 You know, I woke up this morning.
Laura Allen. Say my mind. Say my mind. It stayed on freedom. Now you just saw a demonstration of the kind of theomusicologists we'll need when we're marching into the state capitals all around this country. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but that's exactly how we'll go in. So start looking Alaska, start looking Oregon, start looking Washington for that person. We'll be talking about that tomorrow. At this time, I want to ask Aaron Scott, tremendous leader, along with, is it Eric? Yes. Eric, to come up together as they will give us welcome, host welcome. We want to welcome them as they come to the mic at this time, and they all welcome us to this space. Let's invite them to come.
I'm Aaron. This is Eric. Eric works here. Eric's going to tell us whose land we're honored to find ourselves on tonight as guests.
All right, Yate. My name is Eric, and I am a member of the Dene Nation. And so tonight we're gathered in Watlabalt, or the Intellectual House, which is Watlabalt is Lashutsi, the common language spoken here in these areas by the indigenous people, which translates to Intellectual House. And so a brief history. This place has been it was conceived 47 years ago, the idea, the dream. Unfortunately, the person who it came from passed away before we opened our doors. And so, so this is occupied land, and the University of Washington acknowledges the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to Seattle, welcome to Washington, welcome to the Northwest, welcome to the Poor People's Campaign. My name is Aaron Scott. I'm a street chaplain and organizer in Grays Harbor County, the most economically, Grays Harbor County, all right, thank you. The most economically distressed county in Washington State. I serve on the National Steering Committee of the Poor People's Campaign. I've been working on this campaign for 10 years now, all over the country. But tonight, we're in Seattle for a reason. In more ways than one, you know, this city is the belly of the beast. The single richest individual on the face of the planet works here and calls King County his home. I won't mention any names. You can stop by Microsoft and ask about him. Amazon has turned this city into America's largest company town. Meanwhile, we are in an officially declared state of emergency on homelessness.
That's right.
In Seattle, for every 20 unhoused people who get into housing each month, almost 100 more become homeless. And an average of 12 people in Seattle every month die homeless. Somehow, in this city that showcases the heights of prosperity and technological advancement, where politicians creatively manage to find the funds for a new youth jail, a highly militarized police force, and endless sweeps of homeless encampments and RVs, they can't figure out how to solve the problem that tonight there are pregnant women sleeping in tents all over the city. There are families with children living in their cars in this city, in this rich city.
Teach us.
So we're coming together tonight because we can't keep waiting on them to fiddle while Rome burns. And we're coming together in Seattle tonight because 50 years ago, when MLK called for the first Poor People's Campaign, the Northwest stood up. Specifically, Flo Ware, a black woman from the Central District who put in decades of poor people's organizing before Dr. King even dreamed of it, stood up. Specifically, Esther Ross of the Stillaguamish tribe, who fought tooth and nail for federal recognition of her nation, striking fear and dread into the hearts of Congress members every time they saw her pushing her walker up to the Capitol, stood up. specifically Hank Adams, an Assiniboine Sioux who grew up on the Quinault Res in Grays Harbor County, who was shot in the stomach by white vigilantes when he took part in the fish wars with the late, great Billy Frank Jr., stood up. Flo, Esther, and Hank led a caravan of 26 busloads to D.C. from Washington, Oregon, Montana, the Dakotas, and Alaska in 1968 for the first Poor People's Campaign. Hank Adams is still alive. He's 74. I sent him an invitation. I don't know if he made it out tonight or if he's watching the live stream, but Mr. Hank Adams, if you're listening, thank God for you. We're here at Intellectual House. We're here at Intellectual House tonight to honor your life and your sacrifices, and we're here to pick up the work you started with Dr. King 50 years ago, so let's get down to it.
Let's take a moment and honor this holy land. As she said, this is occupied territory. It belonged to others long before it belonged to the University of Washington. And we have to remember, it's like I met when I went to Alaska and many places. You all do know Alaska is the largest landmass of all the states, even though on the map it's made to look really, really small. And Texas is made to look really, really big, and that is because Alaska was controlled and was by the natives. And there were forces that did not want it to appear as large as it actually was. And so we are here on this occupied territory. And Aaron, we thank God for your ministry and others, these chaplains, not hidden away in institutions, but dealing with the institutional realities of poverty and racism every day. And I would say, Aaron, not only chaplains, but prophets in the harbor. Prophets in the harbor. And let us remember the names she called, honor their spirits right now. People so often tell history so wrong. They said the Poor People's Campaign was Dr. King's idea. Actually, the first meeting, there were 25 people in that room. Cesar Chavez and people from here and others were in the room. And so we honor that tonight we have chosen not to merely commemorate the Poor People's Campaign. We don't need any more commemorations. We need reimagination, re-engagement. So we are re-engaging the Poor People's Campaign. And we say a national call for a moral revival, combining those two, because we need a revival of our morality, understanding in this nation. Let's honor those who died, whether they were shot in the stomach or whether they died from just giving so much, fighting for others. And in this sacred space, I'm glad she welcomed us to deal honestly with what people will not show you if they were trying to get you to buy a home in Seattle. And that's the problem, attention violence that is perpetrated against the poor and those who are on the margins. We are saying no more, no more. So I want to ask all of the clergy now to come, John Steen, Cecilia Kingman, and Rabbi Deborah Kolodny. And I just want to ask tonight, is there an imam or a Muslim brother or sister in this house tonight? Is there an imam? Would you come up and stand with these clergies just as, because I too am Muslim. This is a season we cannot allow people to be isolated.
That's right.
We will not allow it anymore. So as a Christian, I could say tonight, I too am a Muslim. I too am Jewish. And if you want to attack Muslims, you're going to have to attack me as well. If also there are any people here while they lead us in prayer that would like to take a knee we invite some of you to come to the front and do so. I am so amazed at people who would criticize people for taking a knee, which is one of the most sacred positions in the religious economy. Muslims take a knee. Christians take a knee. The Pope takes a knee. Jews take a knee. And to criticize folk who would take a knee and say they're desecrating something, when in fact you can be standing up with your hand over your heart and desecrate the real meaning of the flag, because the blue on the flag stands for justice. So if you're working against justice, you are desecrating what the flag is supposed to stand for. And we in faith, we take knees because we don't bow to any flag or any country. We bow ultimately to the God of the universe and declare that justice is more important and love is more important than anything. So anyone who would love to take a knee while they pray. Brothers and sisters of the cloth, clergy, and my dear Muslim sister, Assalamu alaikum. Alaikum salam.
I have to take a moment of mom privilege. I've got one of my own lost over here. Hannah, do you want to just come up here with me? Okay, yeah. I just can see my own little one's face. Come on up. Kids can come in and out of this space. That's what we said. This is a children's campaign, right? All right, you just stand right here with mom. Okay. All right. All right. Will you join us in the spirit of meditation and prayer? Holy One, thou of many names, and thou beyond all naming, we gather this evening in thanksgiving. We give thanks for this gathered body, for these shining faces and strong voices, all gathered here in common purpose. We give thanks for the presence of so many good hearts and bright spirits. We give thanks for all those across the country who share our vision. We give thanks for the power rising among your people.
We gather this evening in sorrow and sometimes in anger to see the suffering of your people, the despair and destruction that has fallen over the land, the forces of division and greed that would separate us from one another, from the sacred ground of our Mother Earth, from our holy purpose. Show us our tasks of reparation and healing.
We gather this evening in hope and in courage. We believe in the vision of a people made whole. We believe a new day is still possible. We ask for strength and power and clearness of sight. As we seek to heal our people, our land, and our nation, help us to walk in the paths of peace and justice and righteousness. Help us to announce this vision with joyful, loving spirits, that all who meet us might join our cause.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. May our hearts be filled with the love and light that our Creator, our originator, or the goodness in this universe. May we seek the good and the light in each and every one of our beings, strangers, friends, family, the other. Let us look for the love and the light.
We ask this in the name of all that is sacred. We praise all of your names. We cherish all of your people. We honor all your lands. We rejoice in our togetherness. Amen. Ashe. Blessed be.
Amen. Amen. Ashton, oh my. What a powerful moment across the nation. And if you would, in the tradition of Native people, would all of us stand quietly for a second? I need to know which way is due north from here. Which way is north? Is it this way? Okay, good. Shh. Very sacred moment for now. I want to ask us to turn north and honor all of the freedom fighters and the justice seekers who have come from the north, whose spirits yet speak to us from the north. I'd ask now that we would turn to the south. That we would honor all of the freedom fighters, the justice seekers of all different races, classes, colors, and sexualities that down through the years have come through the South, who have stood their ground, who would now turn to the right and honor the West. All those freedom fighters, all of those persons of faith, persons not of faith who believed in the moral arc of the universe and had a great faith in justice and love and mercy, let us honor their spirits. Now we would turn and face the east and honor all of those who have come from the eastern parts of the world, who've had to stand, whether it be in Tiananmen Square or wherever it has been, those who have dared to stand for justice, stand for love, stand for mercy. We honor them. We honor their memory, we honor their spirit. Ashe. You may be seated. This is a movement that is open to everyone. The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival, with a goal that we'll talk about at the end of having 40 days of simultaneous direct action in 25 states in the District of Columbia, with no less than 1,000 people in each state and 2,500 in the District of Columbia to launch, not commemorate, but to launch a movement that will issue a moral challenge to the moral crisis of our time. Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis will speak tonight and help us to understand the vastness and the importance of this vision and why it is our time now to stand together. We were going to show a video that would show you how people are connecting all over the country so that we can come out of despair and recognize that all over, and not just because of Trump. This movement is not because of Donald Trump, because even if Hillary had been elected or Obama had 4 more years, we would still need to address the issues. Trumpism might exacerbate it, but even if tomorrow he was impeached, still we would have 1/3 of this nation in poverty. And I'll let Liz deal with those facts and figures right here in this state. We'd still be dealing with issues that the Poor People Campaign sought to deal with 50 years ago: racism, militarism, and poverty. We have a moral crisis Systemic racism is alive and well, white nationalism. And we're not talking about interpersonal, whether you have a black friend or kiss a black baby at a hurricane shelter in Houston. The kind of institutional systemic racism and white supremacy we're talking about, we're so clear on it from a policy perspective that you can be black and be a white nationalist. If you really understand that white nationalism is not about statues, but about statutes. And that the majority of these statues that were raised in this country were not raised after the Civil War. They were raised after 1896, between 1896 and 1922, to celebrate two things: the reincarnation and the revisitation of white policy supremacy, not white people, white policy supremacy in the law. Three things: and to stand against black and white people working together who were the reconstructionists of the 1800s. Those statues were raised as a sign that after Plessy versus Ferguson, deconstruction had taken hold in America. And the one particularly in Charlottesville was raised to honor the fact that white supremacists believed in 1914, 15, 16, and 17 that they had elected a white supremacist to the White House named Woodrow Wilson 100 years ago. Before Bannon was ever in the White House, Woodrow Wilson was playing Birth of a Nation in the White House. So we cannot in this moment say we've never seen this before. The fact of the matter is systemic racism, white nationalism, white supremacy, whether we look at it through the lens of many things, voter suppression, immigration, denial of immigration reform, attack on Muslims, the attacks on health care, all that have their roots in white nationalism, is not new. But it is what Neil Painter, the Princeton scholar, says, an iconography of a very, very too often carried out American activity, call and response. We have a call for justice. It lasts a little while, and then almost simultaneously or right along at the same time, simultaneously or concurrently, we have a response of hatred and extremism and vitriol. We have to address the moral crisis of systemic racism. Liz is going to tell you we got to address the moral crisis of systemic poverty. Right now, one of the greatest examples of why we have to do that is that we went through an election last year. We had 26 debates. I don't know if you're going to talk about that. If you will, I'll let you. We share, so we do partner preaching. We share together. 26 debates, Democratic and Republican. Democrat and Republican, 26 primary, and not 1 hour on systemic racism. To elect the president of these United States, we didn't have 1 hour on voter suppression, 1 hour on poverty. And a third of this country lives in poverty, working poor and poor and extreme poor. We didn't have 1 hour on ecological devastation. There wasn't 1 hour on the war economy. And there wasn't 1 hour on the way in which the heretical theology of white Christian nationalism has too often taken over the moral conversation in this country. That article, I didn't say Republican primary or debates, not 1 hour. We had more conversation about tweets and innuendos than we did about the substantive issues that impact the lives of those on the margin and the least of these. And that should trouble us all. And we need a movement that, if it does nothing else, will change the narrative and say no more. You will no longer in this country continue to engage in attention violence against racism and poverty and ecological devastation and the war economy and our schizophrenic moral narrative. that loves to put our hand on Bible on one hand, and then our policies violate everything the Bible tells us to do for the least of these, and the hurting and the broken. Why do we have to do this? Well, last thing I want to mention is that right now, nothing is more clear why we have to have a movement than this so-called tax bill. And I'm not talking about that the Republicans pushed it. The Republicans say their tax bill will help the middle class. The Democrats say their plan would hurt the middle class. Nobody's talking about the poor. Democrats act like it's a curse word to say the poor. Republicans, when they say the poor, they say it's a state of mind. And people, it's a choice, and people create. And both of those are wrong. And there must be a movement that changes that narrative. Right now, they're talking about cutting $1.5 trillion. That's the same amount of money that some people want to cut from Medicaid and Medicare. The amount of money they're cutting in estate tax is the same amount of money that some want to cut from education and other programs that help lift up the least of these. And everybody's talking about the middle class, but not about how this tax plan, even a partial of it, would actually raise the kind of taxes that hurt poor people the most, sales taxes on gas and clothing. My friends, a nation is in trouble. A democracy is in trouble when systemic racism, systemic poverty have so grabbed our national way of doing things that we can literally ignore the poor. That's a sin before all that is holy. And we must have a movement, not for the poor, but with the poor. That creates a stage for the poor to speak and to stand and to challenge the way things are going. Not because we believe we're going to fix everything next year, but because we know we won't fix anything unless we stand up together. We have to have a movement not to save a party and not to save any individual candidate, but literally a movement to save the heart and soul of this nation itself. And the reason we cannot walk away from moral language, and we must have people of faith that will come into the public square along with people who may not be of a particular religious faith, but they believe in the moral arc of the universe, or they believe in the great tenets of the Constitution about the establishment of justice and the providing for the common good and promoting the general welfare. Or they understand that theologically, for instance, for Christians and Jews, there are more than 2,500 scriptures about how you treat the least of these and those on the margins and the stranger. We have to have a movement that is not afraid, where people of faith can put on their religious garb and, if necessary, go to jail, because they will not be quiet. They will not stop standing. Why? Because here is the ugly truth. You would think that if a nation, Liz, was still dealing with systemic racism and systemic poverty and ecological devastation and the war economy and so much false moral narrative in the public square, you would think, I would pray as a preacher, that the nation would take a knee. The nation. That we would all bow down and repent. But here's the fact of the matter. Far too much of the religion in the public square is the cause of the problem that we have today, and is giving cover to the oppressor rather than standing up against the oppressor. And we have to have a movement where Jews and rabbis and imams and Christians and others stand up and say, we will no longer be chaplains to the empire, we will be prophets to the nation. So we're coming together. We'll talk later about 1040, but right now, the ultimate goal of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival first, is to put a face on the facts. Not just to talk about numbers, but to talk about humanity and human beings. So tonight, we have some testimonies. We have someone coming to talk about poverty, to testify, not to tell you how they pulled themselves up out of their own bootstraps and that everything is fine and folk just work hard, but to really give us a picture through their life and their living of what is the reality about poverty. Then we have a testimony about systemic racism. The first one is that Sister Buckmaster? Mashallah, and then the Reverend Carl Livingston is coming, and then to talk about racism. And then we have a testimony about the war economy from Gina Boer with About Face Veterans Against the War. And then we have a testimony about ecological degradation. Now they can't do it all tonight. They're going to each talk about 3 minutes to the nation. There are thousands of people watching. Their face and their story will inform us as to why we have to have this movement. And they're going to stand together because we have to have a movement that doesn't allow people to separate us and say, well, the people against the war economy are over there. The people dealing with systemic racism are over there. And the people fighting against poverty are over there. No, in reality, we have interlocking injustices, and therefore we must have a interrelational movement, a fusion movement, where we all stand together for each other, and we bring each other up, and we transform the nation together. So would you invite our testifiers to come at this time? Make sure you say who you are.
My name is Mashyla Buckmaster. I'm 28 years old. I'm the proud mother of I'm a proud single mom of a beautiful 1-year-old named Ella. I'm celebrating almost 2 years clean and sober. I live in Thank you very much. I've spent 5 or so more years homeless. Once during my homelessness, a neighbor tried to assault me by throwing a log through the window of an empty building where I was squatting because he was so enraged that homeless people were living on his block. I got Section 8 housing after my daughter was born, just before my organization began providing cold weather shelter to our homeless members. For 110 days last winter, Chaplains on the Harbor hosted about 20 people in our church, most of them millennials who caught a record trying to survive in a county with no good jobs, no decent affordable housing, horrible health care, and plenty of heroin. Business and property owners were outraged by our cold weather shelter. Our homeless members were stalked by police. Our pastor was threatened with vigilante violence. The same man who tried to attack me during my own time squatting also assaulted a 19-year-old homeless member of our community on church property and later attempted to run him over with his truck. I've volunteered to stay overnight at our church and keep people safe while they slept. I stayed there through the nights while the threats continued to pour in. I stayed because my community stepped up to save my life when the rest of society didn't care whether I lived or died, and now it was my turn to protect my community. I'm joining the Poor People's Campaign because I need a movement that's as tough as I am. Poor and homeless people get stereotyped like we're too stupid and lazy to solve our own problems. I wasn't homeless because I was stupid and lazy. I was homeless because our county has no problem with the pregnant mothers being homeless in the dead of winter, while just 2 hours away in Seattle, the CEOs of Microsoft and Amazon have made themselves the richest individuals on the planet. You tell me who's messed up in this situation. Some of you might be suspicious about a Grace Harbor County person getting up here in front of this crowd thinking, aren't they all just a bunch of rednecks out there? Yes, I'm a redneck. We are radical rednecks. We're hillbillies for the liberation of people. We are the living reminder that when they went to throw out their white trash, they didn't burn it. We're here to stand shoulder to shoulder with anybody taking up this campaign, and trust me, we're the kind of scrappy you want on your side in a fight.
Yeah.
I'm Pastor Carl Livingston, professor at Seattle Central College and senior pastor of Kingdom Christian Center. I'm here to speak on the invitation of De-Escalate Washington. I want to tell you, I know about racism. I grew up in the Hilltop area of Tacoma when African Americans had to be there, when the police arrested you after dark, when you went out to communities like Fircrest or even the north end of town. And I saw sometimes how people's lives were in danger by police over-policing, overreacting, and they were not held accountable. I want to give you one quick story and then one other and stop. One is that later I became an attorney. That's after growing up on welfare, Kool-Aid, oatmeal, and in the morning, hot water cornbread, and having to make ends meet. Went to law school, and when I came out, I represented for free a person that had been arrested. They told me, they said they're concerned about the police beating him in jail. I showed up, he didn't show up in court. I went up to the jail because the judge said, Your Honor, attorney, your client better be there tomorrow. I'm like, I gotta give him more free time. And I showed up, he wasn't there, he wouldn't come out. I said, no, I'm not gonna leave till you bring my client out. The African American was temporarily serving because the person that would normally run the jail was not there, and he let me back to go see my client. I'm talking through the jail cell, you gotta be there tomorrow, man, and I'm doing free time, and you gotta be nice. All of a sudden I saw him crying. I ran to his bed, and I saw him bucking and weaving, but he couldn't move. The jailer grabbed me and said, you're not supposed to be in the cell, you're supposed to stay in the hallway. I said, this is my client. I elbowed him back. He told me, he said he'd been laying 3 days in P, couldn't move. He had been hit in the stomach by some hard object, so hard that he couldn't feel his legs. And that he was hit only because he was asking for extra cover for an inmate in jail. We're standing up for justice, that justice affects us economically and in the criminal justice system and in every single way. This is just one little story. And it's affected my life, but I've spent most of my time trying to help others. That's why I'm glad there's this Poor People's Campaign, and I'm glad for De-Escalate Washington. I'm glad that we have petitions out there and that we can hold police more accountable, but I'm glad we can also stand up to make a difference. We need you.
My name's Gina Bua, and I'm the co-chair of About Face Veterans Against the War. My story is like many other veteran stories. I joined the Army out of economic necessity. My ex-husband had lost his job. We had 2 children with no health insurance and a home that would soon be in foreclosure. I eventually came to the realization, though, in my military career, that our nation's military is being used to support corporations. So I made an about face and joined my fellow veterans in our effort to end the war economy by defunding the military-industrial complex. We cannot sustain our current war economy with an annual defense budget of $611 billion. We must pass a people's budget to reduce defense spending and redirect taxpayer money towards education, healthcare, replacing crumbling infrastructure, and building a sustainable energy grid. As long as the defense industry lobbyists have a stranglehold on Congress, we will not be able to pass a people's budget. We must stand together and break the military-industrial complex's hold on our political system. And especially protect our children from military recruiters who target high schools in impoverished neighborhoods.
My name is Rondale Roliolazo Gabwat, and I am the current chairperson of Gabriela Seattle. We're a Filipino-led grassroots organization that is fighting for national democracy in the Philippines. The Philippines is a former colony of the United States and still today has a strong influence of U.S. imperialism on the Philippine government, military exercises with the armed forces of the Philippines, and unequal treaties such as the Visiting Forces Agreement and the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Trump plans on visiting Asia. He's been in Korea right now. Plans on visiting the Philippines from November 12th until the 14th, which will bring more poverty, exploitation, and oppression to the Philippine people. The impact of U.S. imperialism and its military presence in the women and the children, including economic violence. The Philippine government doesn't protect their people. As we saw with the murder trial of Private First Class Joseph Scott Pemberton, a U.S. troop who killed a Filipina trans woman, Jennifer Laude. In order to have a truly free and sovereign Philippines, we call on all U.S. troops to be taken out of the Philippines. We must be critical of the increasing U.S. military budget and call for government spending to be prioritized on social services such as healthcare, education, and immigration in the U.S. If we join forces, we can redirect our country's economic resources to benefit the people instead of corporations and violent imperialist wars of aggression.
My name is Jill Magaliman. I am with God Green. We are a people of color-led environmental justice organization based out of South Seattle. I want to give honor and thanks to the Duwamish tribe and the tribes of Coast Salish Sea, whose land we are on, because they are the original defenders of and protectors of this environment, who have been fighting for generations and years to protect the environment, but also have been using alternatives to fossil fuels before we even started doing that in the U.S. As a person growing up in Seattle, living here majority of my life, almost all of my life, all but 3 years, I never considered myself an environmentalist. Even though I grew up with the highway and the Nucor Steel Factory, which is a Forbes 500 company right outside my window. I had never heard about green jobs or food justice until I got involved with community organizing. But I learned that because our communities are so strong and resilient and always willing to fight for each other, this is also part of our work, is to fight for the environment, our home. Climate change is the greatest threat to racial justice and to our communities. Already, majority of the polluting industries and Superfund sites are located near black and brown neighborhoods due to redlining and racist land use policies. As a result, people of color are more likely to have asthma and respiratory problems than white people, as well as be exposed to cancer and other health ailments, and leading to lower life expectancy rates. With the heat waves, the droughts, and the wildfires blowing smoke into our communities, it's only getting worse, and these ailments are exacerbated. Right now, Seattle is also becoming a wealthy green city for the wealthy and corporations. It is one of the top 5 cities in America with the highest concentration of rich millennials, and the recent census data shows that most of the people moving in are earning over $100,000 a year. As West Coast cities are boasting about their cutting their carbon emissions and growing their local economies, housing prices and costs of food are skyrocketing, and people of color and poor people are being put out on the streets. Rapid gentrification is driving people further away from their social safety nets,
the resources and services what keep them resilient. Instead, they are being pushed into EJ hotspots, flood zones, and areas with less resources. Or worse, they are becoming homeless and being exposed to the extreme weather events. And in the aftermath of climate change disasters, poor people and people of color are the ones to lose their homes and cannot return, as seen with Hurricane Katrina, Typhoon Haiyan, Superstorm Sandy, the Eastern Washington forest fires, and now Hurricane Maria. We know that our communities are resilient, and when we are kept together, and it's our neighbors and our families who take care of each other and check in on each other, not FEMA, not Red Cross, not ICE, not Seattle Police Department. It's our community. Community resilience means keeping it in the ground, and I want to give a shout out to the No DAPL Coalition and the Water Protectors. I want us to fight for a just transition, for an economy that's healthy for our people and our planet. Thank you.
Somebody repeat after me and say, somebody hurting my brother. And it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting my sister. And it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting Mother Earth. And it's gone on far too long. Somebody is hurting the children, and it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting black people, and brown people, and poor white people, and it's gone on far too long. Somebody is pushing for too much war, and too much hate, too much violence, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Let's thank our testifiers. Now I want to ask them to figure a way to stay up here or stay right in front, so wherever we can get a couple of chairs, but I want you all close the lids, because in the tradition I come out of, testifiers give you the reason. The preacher or the teacher tells you what gives you the direction of what to do, because whenever there are testifiers, it should encourage all of us to stand up and be strong. And the point of these testifiers is to say, we've been on 15 of these. And wherever we go, people can stand up and testify about the same realities of racism, poverty, ecological devastation, and the war economy. And that is informing us that we have to build this movement. So in a moment, I want to ask the choir to come and give us one quick song, because to get Dr. Harris up tonight to talk about the issues that are in front of us and what we're talking about doing. Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis is a sister beloved. Many of you know her. She has recently written a book entitled What Jesus Really Said About the Poor. She's a PhD in New Testament, but she's an activist. She's been on the streets. She's argued in the suites. She's a sister that's not afraid to stand up. She understands interlocking injustices and the need for an intersectional, deeply moral, deeply constitutional, anti-racist, anti-poverty, pro-justice movement. The Kairos Center and others have been working for more than 10 years, and her and I, after deep prayer, accepted an invitation to be co-chairs of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And I want y'all to keep, I know it's a long name, but don't shorten it. Because we want people to know it's a Poor People's Campaign, but we also know that we have to challenge the moral hypocrisy of this nation. Sometimes people think, well, morality is about inspiration and other things about real issues, but no, poverty is a moral issue. Budgets are moral documents. You know what I'm saying? She understands that. And so we said we would figure a way to combine the 10 years that Kairos has been working on Poor People's Campaign, the 10 years of the Moral Monday, Moral Revival movement, bring all of that together and begin to build from the states up this launching of a Poor People's Campaign and a national call for moral. She is my sister. I love this girl. I love her for her strength. I love her for her commitment. I love her for her integrity. I told her I'm willing to stand with her, go to jail, and we're building in a way so that, as you know, Dr. King was killed, but people forget it wasn't just him. It was 25. The Poor People's Campaign still happened. People forget that. And we're not deluded about what this means when you challenge power. But we are committed to serve this movement, not be the high-profile leader, but to serve this movement and to help build across this country. So after the choir sings, and I want y'all can begin to come, I want us to welcome a Deborah, the Jewish rabbi would understand this, a Deborah of our own season. Deborah was a sister in the Bible who stood against oppression. And when everybody wanted to quit, Deborah said one word, up. It's time to go up to battle. And if we do, God will take care of us. I want you to honor a modern day Deborah and give her your attentive ears and your support right after this tremendous choir gives us a song. Give it up for them again. Give it up for them.
amazing choir. And one more time, will you turn to your neighbor and touch their hand, or give them a hug, or give them a greeting? All right. So it is an honor to be with you all tonight, and it is especially an honor to serve as co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival with the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber. So that's really good. Some thanks and appreciation. You all just listened to some powerful testimonies, and y'all seem to be a people that are very engaged in what's happening. So I actually don't need to tell you that we are living in very difficult and very dangerous times.
Yes, yes.
Our nation is mired in foreign wars. There is the increased militarization of our communities, while poverty and systemic racism, environmental destruction, race, gender, and class inequalities are all mounting. We've been on the road for about 2.5 months, and if we look at what's been going on in our country and our world since we started this 15-state tour, there are storms raging and destroying the lives and livelihoods of especially the most vulnerable in Texas and Florida and North Carolina and California and Puerto Rico and so many places. There is a concerted attack on our immigrant brothers and sisters with the revocation of DACA, the building of a wall, increased detention and deportation. We have neo-Nazis marching on our streets, and black and brown and poor bodies being murdered by police. The latest shooting just yesterday and other massive outbreaks of violence in the recent weeks demonstrate that people are being dehumanized, that life isn't seen as sacred, and that our politicians are sending a message that hate, not love, rules supreme in our land.
Teach us, Liz.
Tens of millions of people in our nation are on the brink of losing their health care. And if the current budget that is being proposed passes, it will be the largest transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top since the U.S. Civil War. All of this made me think about Jeremiah 6 earlier today. If you read from the Message translation, it says, everyone's after the dishonest dollar. Little people and big people alike. Prophets and priests and everyone in between twist words and doctor truth. They dressed the wound of my people as though it were not serious. Peace, peace, they say.
Mama.
When there is no peace.
That's right, that's right.
My people are broken, shattered, and they put on Band-Aids, saying it's not so bad, you'll be just fine. But things are not just fine. Do you suppose that they are embarrassed over this outrage? No. They have no shame.
No shame.
They don't even know how to blush. There's no hope for them. They've hit bottom, and there's no getting up. As far as I'm concerned, they're finished. God has spoken. But God reminds us, stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for those ancient paths where those freedom fighters have gone before. Ask where the good way is and walk in it, and you will find life for your soul.
Amen.
Consider the facts of what's happening in our nation today. 1 in 2 people in the United States is poor or low income. 43% of children live in families that don't have enough to survive. There are 65 million workers who are making less than $15 an hour. And our politicians are saying peace, peace, when there is no peace.
There is no peace.
Here in Washington state, 11% of the population lives below the federal poverty line. 26% of Native Americans, 23% of African Americans, 19.5% of Latinx people. And while the percentage of white people living in poverty is lower, the greatest number of poor people in Washington state, in Oregon, in Alaska, are poor white people. Consider the massive systemic racism that is taking place in these states. Things like voter suppression because of felony disenfranchisement, in terms of the violence that police are enacting in our communities, the kind of environmental racism that folks are facing. Consider that in Washington state, 23% of children living under 18 are living in households without adequate food. That in Oregon, 26% of children living in under 18 living in households that don't have enough food and health care. Or in Alaska, that 20% are living in households without adequate housing. I mean, just think about the reality of what is going on in our world today. In Washington state, the living wage for an adult and one child for a 2-person family is $24.74 an hour. But what is the minimum wage in this state? It's $11. It's less than half of what you need to survive.
Teach.
In Oregon, an adult and a child would need to make nearly $25 an hour. The minimum wage there is $10.25 an hour. In Alaska, you'd have to make close to $24.75. The minimum wage in Alaska is $9.80. And then let's think about where that money is going. In Washington state, Washington spent $12.6 billion on a defense budget just last year. Oregon spent 1.3. Alaska spent 3.3 billion and is in the top 10 states for acreage used by the military, even though it has a smaller population. And then if we look at the problem of ecological destruction, there's just rampant oil spillage, pollution, water being tainted, and it's across all of this area, the entire Pacific Northwest, and what's left because of the timber industry. I mean, just all of this. It causes a crisis. And then just to get a little more specific, just a few hours from here in Grays Harbor, that has the highest youth criminalization rate for highest youth incarceration rate for non-criminal offenses in the entire nation. Kids are being kept in solitary confinement, being made to relieve themselves in their cells. Kids are doing this in the richest nation in the country. In the world, in a state that has the richest people in the world. There are attacks going on against homeless encampments across Washington, across Oregon. And I don't know if folks saw some of the analysis coming out around the tax cuts that were being proposed last week and the impact that they would have here on Washington State. One of the parts of the proposed plan is to repeal the federal estate tax on estates worth more than $5.5 million or $10.9 million for couples. So while there are only 90 wealthy families in Washington State that would be subject to that tax next year, if they eliminate this tax, the lost revenue from eliminating it would amount to a sum that would cover food, nutritional benefits for 200,000 people.
Teach, Liz, teach.
With all of this, we hear peace. Peace. But there is no peace. We need a moral revolution of values. We need a revival. We need a breakthrough. We need this Poor People's Campaign. We need to save the heart and soul of our society and of our democracy. In one of his last books from 1967, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? Reverend Dr. King talks about a similar crisis that was happening about 50 years ago. A moral crisis that was focused on the real moral social issues of his day: racism, poverty, the lack of health care, foreign wars, not issues of personal behavior. So he says, we must see now that the evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism are all tied together. You can't get rid of one without getting rid of the other. Jesus confronted this problem of the interrelatedness of evil one day, or rather, it was one night. A big shot came to him, and he asked Jesus a question: what shall I do to be saved? Jesus didn't get bogged down in a specific evil. He looked at Nicodemus, and he said, he didn't say, now, Nicodemus, you must not drink liquor. He didn't say, Nicodemus, you must not commit adultery. He didn't say, Nicodemus, you must not lie. He didn't say you must not steal. He said, Nicodemus, you must be born again. In other words, Nicodemus, the whole structure of your life must be changed. Now this is what we are dealing with in America. Somebody must say to America, America, if you have contempt for life, if you exploit human beings by seeing them as less than human, if you will treat human beings as a means to an end, you thingify those human beings. And if you will thingify persons, you will exploit them economically. And if you will exploit persons economically, you will abuse your military power to protect your economic interests, your economic exploitations. So what America must be told today is that she must be born again. The whole structure of American life must be changed. This Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, stands for the end of systemic racism, white nationalism, and white supremacy. The dismantling of unjust criminalization systems that exploit and incarcerate poor communities, communities of color, and unjust immigration policies that punish, detain, and separate families. We believe that equal protection under the law is non-negotiable. We believe that people should not live in or die from poverty in the richest nation ever to exist. We recognize the fundamental rights of all people to living wages, to guaranteed income, to quality health care, to housing and clean water and sanitation services, and equality and health communities, and free access to quality education. Blaming poor people and claiming that the United States does not have an abundance of resources are false narratives.
That's right.
Used to perpetrate exploitation, exclusion, and inequality. America, your whole structure of life must change. We believe in the transformation of the war economy into a peace economy that values all humanity. In the words of the Reverend Dr. King, a society that spends more on the military than it does on education or health or other caring for its people is approaching spiritual death. And we stand for an end to ecological devastation. The buying and selling of the earth's resources to benefit a few wealthy corporations is not okay. It will stop with us. The detrimental impacts of climate change, especially on the poor and marginalized, cannot be the way into the future. And we believe that renewable energy is within reach, and it will lessen the demands that we have on fossil fuels, and therefore help communities impacted by extreme extraction like fracking and mountaintop removal, these oil pipelines, and all of these things that are devastating our communities. And when we explore the interconnections of these issues with systemic racism, poverty, the war economy, and ecological devastation, we hear a lot of resonance to that quote from Dr. King. We see how systemic racism allows us to deny the humanity of our brothers and sisters. And by denying the humanity of others, we are given permission to exploit and exclude people from the economy and from other parts of life. And by exploiting and excluding people, we are emboldened to abuse our military power and through violence and war, control resources. And this quest to control resources leads to the potential destruction of our entire ecosystem and everything that lives in it. And if we don't see how our current moral narrative justifies this cycle and distracts us from it, then we're not paying attention. So we need a revolution of values. We need a revival. We need a breakthrough. We need a Poor People's Campaign, and so we are building one.
Yes, yes, yes.
50 years after Dr. King and Cesar Chavez and Hank Adams and other leaders called for a Poor People's Campaign, we see what King called of a new and unsettling force, a freedom church of the poor, a nonviolent army of the poor is rising up. And this movement of a Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, includes families living with poisoned water in Flint, Michigan, and homeless encampments in California and Oregon and Washington State. It includes impacted families in the Gulf Coast from the BP oil spill and from everything else that is taking place there. It includes families calling for hugs, not walls. On the U.S.-Mexico border, where we just were a couple of weeks ago, with families reaching out across a fake border with 3 minutes with their families, trying to be reunited because of unjust immigration. It includes families without sanitation services and with kids playing in raw sewage in Lowndes County, Alabama. It includes people fighting for health care in Vermont and Maine and Pennsylvania and North Carolina. Low-wage workers struggling to pay their bills while the minimum wage is far from a living wage, and vets who are coming back from fighting unjust wars to continue to struggle to provide for their families, and millions of people who face poverty and its many cruel forms across this country every day. This group of people is rising up. We are calling for a Poor People's Campaign. We are saying that we need a national moral revival to restore the streets to live in. So this is what we're about. As King was talking about in 1967, he got onto the radio and said he was going to announce that we needed a Poor People's Campaign. And he says, there is nothing wrong with a traffic law which says that you have to stop for a red light. But when a fire is raging, the fire truck goes right through that red light, and normal traffic had better get out of its way. Or when a man is bleeding to death, the ambulance goes through those red lights at top speed. There is a fire raging now for the poor of this society. They are living in tragic conditions because of the terrible economic injustices that keep them locked in. Disinherited people all over the world are bleeding to death from deep social and economic wounds. They need brigades of ambulance drivers who will have to ignore the red lights of the present system until the emergency is solved. Massive civil disobedience is a strategy for social change, which is at least as forceful as an ambulance with its sirens on full. And so we are here this evening in Seattle, Washington, to invite you all to be brigades of ambulance drivers. Will you sign up today to join into a nonviolent civil disobedience movement? Will you join us in this coming spring, starting on Mother's Day, May 13th, and going for 40 days until June 21st, to be a part of 40 days of nonviolent civil disobedience, a season of moral resistance, a season of organizing, a season of saying, this is enough to stop with us today. We are going to build a moral movement. We are going to change this nation. We are not going to hear peace, peace, because there is no peace, and so we are going to change it. There will be people from 25 states across the country and Washington, D.C., who are going to sign up 1,000 people who are willing to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience over the course of those 40 days. And there'll be 2,500 people in Washington, D.C. at the same time. Those 40 days will include education and culture and marches and protests. And between now and then, we are connecting with folks in those states, in Washington State, in Oregon, in Alaska, and saying, will you all be the ambulance drivers that we need for this movement? Will you organize people from your state to be at your state capitol? And imagine what that will be. We have heard from historians that never before in the history of this country have 25,000 people simultaneously gotten engaged in nonviolent civil disobedience at state capitals. So this will be something that is historic and big. But it's also just what is needed. We have to break through the narrative that is happening in our country. We have to break through the ignoring of the issues that affect us. And we need to be able to come together across the different lines that at this point divide us to a unified movement that calls for the end to systemic racism, an end to poverty, an end to this war economy, an end to the ecological devastation that is racking our communities and ruining our lives and livelihoods and our futures and our children's future. So I think, yeah.
Can you tell me? Are you ready? Are there any ambulance drivers? Wave your hand. Now I want to ask you first to give it up for this prophetess, this prophet, Liz Theoharis. And I want you just to give us just a few minutes. You're an ambulance driver. Now, Liz mentioned the issues. This movement also has an agenda. We're writing an agenda called The Souls of Poor Folk, Auditing America, that will not only curse the darkness, but will also show the light. Because there are answers to all these problems. If you took $30 billion from the war economy, we could end hunger across the world. If we took some money from the war economy, you know, if you can blow the world up about 7 times, I don't think you need to be able to blow it up anymore. That's 7 times too many. It is not scarcity of resources. It is scarcity of will. It is also that too often people, as Liz have said, peace, peace, where there is no peace, but also we and the progressives, revolutionaries, whatever we call ourselves, we've often bought into the narrative. For instance, many of us call ourselves on the left, and we call them on the right. And then we try to debate and say they're wrong after you've called them the right. We need a movement that doesn't buy into language that is given to us, but a movement that has language of itself. The language of left versus right and Democrat versus Republican, it is too puny. We need some moral language that can say there are some things that are right and some things that are wrong. We've done some mapping. We found out that if you put a map up, and you start with just one of the penetration points of racism, which is voter suppression. And you put voter suppression on the map. And then you overlay that map of the United States with all the states that have the highest level of poverty, and child poverty, and women in poverty, and black people in poverty, and natives in poverty. And then you overlay that map with the states that have the greatest need for health care and the greatest resistance to health care. And then you overlay that map with the greatest needs for living wages and the states that are most resistant to living wages. And you overlay that map with the states that have the greatest ecological devastation and the highest attacks on gay people and the highest attacks on the immigrant community and and the highest density of prisons and the lowest density of labor rights. And after you color all that in, we found out it's the same maps. So what that means is the same people that are against the LGBT community are against public education. The same people against public education are against voting rights. The same people against voting rights are against curtailing the war economy. The same people against curtailing the war economy are against living wages. The same people against living wages are against health care. The same people against health care are against our Hispanic and other immigrant brothers and sisters. The same people against our Hispanic and other immigrant brothers and sisters are against Muslims and are xenophobic, and the same people that are xenophobic are also against protecting the environment, and the same people that are against protecting the environment also want to undermine the ability for everybody to have health care, not as something you get based on what president is in office, but as a human right. And what we've learned, that the map shows us that if they are cynical enough to be together, we must be smart enough to come together. And in the process of coming together, we might even redeem some of them, and they might come and start standing with us for the uplifting of all humanity and not just some humanity. That's why we're together. Now, in order to do that, as Liz says, there have never been 25,000 people. We're not asking for 300 million or 355 million people, but for a remnant. 25,000 people that will act in concert. Notice tonight we didn't take up an offering because we're building to leave everything in the States. We're not going to have another commemoration. There's no need to commemorate what they did 50 years ago and say, oh, how great it was. There's no need to commemorate the march across the Edmonds-Pettus Bridge when we have less voting rights today than we had in 1965. At some point, we have to imitate, not commemorate. Huh? You hear what I'm saying? And what we're saying is if you have 1,000 people, 150 a week, I'm just saying we can't tell you all the tactics. We're going to do that in quiet tomorrow because, you know, but the tactics. And it's simultaneous, not Washington doing something one day and Carolina doing something another day and New York doing, but simultaneous. Do you know we can take over the news cycle? And if we change the narrative, we can work on the agenda. And if people start hearing themselves in the agenda, that 150 million people that are poor, working poor, they will start participating. Because a lot of times the reason they're not participating is because they do not hear their name or their condition. And imagine if we do that. And then imagine if after 40 days, 25,000 people engaged in civil disobedience. We're not going to go to jail, but we're saying if you try to take our rights or shut up, we will go to jail. And what if 25,000 people end up, what if it started out in the State House and then they had to report 250,000 in Ryan's office? 250 in Ryan's office and in McConnell's office. And you say, well, why are you going to target Ryan and McConnell? Because the president is temporary, but the Congress makes laws that are permanent. And state houses, if voter suppression starts in state houses, racist laws about guns start in state houses, denial of health care, state houses. And what if we do this and then after the 40 days, what if we then, those same 1,000 people go back and build power and build relationships and register to vote all of the people who've been left out? And what if we make it so never again can any political party ignore these issues? I said to Liz, and we've talked about it often, I don't think about fixing everything next year. We need a movement, not a moment. We need a revival, not a rally. Huh? We need a turning point, not another tweet. We need folk that will engage for the long haul, not just send one email tomorrow night. We need not to just sign up for a petition to impeach the president. We need a movement that can send him home and keep folk from being elected in the first place. You see what I'm saying? And so I said to her, there comes a point in life that you have to say, what we do may not change everything, but doing nothing is not going to change anything. And at some point in your life, Reverend, you have to say, I'd rather die trying than to live 100 years and to be written on my epitaph. All this stuff was going on, and he or she did nothing to try to change it. And so, finally, we're getting ready to sign up. There are 40,000 plus people online tonight, as far away from Guam right now. People are saying it's time. 40,000 people, plus this room. And we have enough people in here to get the first 1,000. In a moment, I want to ask Yara to sing. I know she done a little bit of walk with me while they're getting these cards. But before you do that, Laura, I want to say one more thing. I want all the preachers to come up here, rabbis, imams. I want the chaplains on the harbor, some of the activists. I want to stand around. Because this is the time where we need the preachers and the imams and the rabbis not to just bless the folk when they go to jail. We need us to go to jail with folk. Come on, all around. Look at all. Look, y'all celebrate. There's some folk that have decided. Y'all can stand even right in front here. They've decided that we need some prophets to the nation. Look at it, America. There's somebody ready to disagree with Jerry Falwell. There's somebody ready to disagree with Franklin Graham. There's somebody that understands that anybody that tries to tell you that a true moral agenda is nothing more than hating gay people and being against abortion and being for prayer in the school and being for property rights and being for gun rights and trying to make sure that you can convince people that Jesus was an original member of the NRA. That is not true theology. That is a form of heresy that we are prepared to challenge. We understand as clergy that anytime you go in and pray P-R-A-Y for a president while that president is praying P-R-E-Y-I-N-G on the least of these, you have just committed theological malpractice. We are very clear. And as we get ready, come up here a minute, y'all, as we get ready to do these cards, now I want you to know Liz is a smart sister. God knows she is smarter than me. But she didn't think of this first. I do all right, I didn't think of it first. Dr. King was tremendous, but like all human beings, he was human. He didn't think of this first. No, 2,600 years ago, the prophet Amos was dealing with a situation where he had a narcissistic egomaniac on the throne. And he had unleashed a whole system of narcissism and greed. That's right. And God told Amos to give the people the directions. I want to tell y'all what he said. I want to read it from the Message Bible. My Hebrew's a little rusted tonight. Amos chapter 5, Amos said, God said, tell the folk that people hate this kind of talk. Raw truth is never popular. But here it is bluntly spoken to the nation. Nation, you're running roughshod over the poor. You're taking the bread right out of their mouths. And because you're doing this, you're never going to move into your luxurious homes in Mar-a-Lago. Let me stay with the text. You're never going to drink wine from the expensive vineyards. Amos 5 says, God says, I know precisely the extent of your violations as a nation. I know the enormity of your sins. And here they are. As a nation, there are too many folk who are bullying right living people. You take bribes on the right and on the left. This is in the Bible. And you kick the poor when they're down. Justice seems like a lost cause. Evil looks like it's epidemic. Decent people are beginning to just throw up their hands. Protest sometimes looks useless. But I need some people, verse 14, that will seek good and not evil if this nation is going to live. I need you talk about God bless Israel, God bless America. That's what you talk about. You claim that God is your best friend, well then live like it. And maybe that will happen. But in order for it to happen, I need some people, I need a few folk, a remnant, who will hate evil and love good. And then I need that remnant to work it out in the public square. I need some priests and others that will no longer just stay in the safety of their sanctuary, but I need some people who will work it out in the public square. And maybe if you get in the public square, I will notice that you're trying to do something. And then I'll give you assistance. Verse 16 says, the God of the angel army said, so if you want to change the nation, go out into the streets and cry loud. I need some people that will fill up the malls and the shops with the cries of doom. I need you to weep loudly and make the nation weep. I need you to empty the offices, the stores, the factories, the workplaces non-violently. I need you to enlist everybody into a general lament to challenge what's going on. Because God says, I want to hear that remnant crying loudly. And if I can get a remnant that won't go along with the talking points, if I can get a remnant that will challenge what's going on, God says, then I'll make my visit. Could it be that until the faithful and the activists stand with the oppressed in the public square, the crisis can't be abated? Could it be that we've gotten to the point now that another tweet's not going to do it? Just signing another petition's not going to do it. Just signing another email is not going to do it. Could it be that God is saying to us, if I have a remnant that will dare go down to the place of power and challenge what's going on and understand that the rejected can lead the revival, that the broken can lead a breakthrough? Could it be that we can change but it will only happen if we work it out in the public square? If we're willing to take our faith and our hearts and our courage and our minds into the public square. I believe it's time to do that. And I'm here to tell you that Amos is dead, Jeremiah is dead, Moses is dead, Muhammad is dead, the disciples are dead, William Lord Garrison, a white abolitionist, dead, Frederick Douglass is dead, Rabbi Heschel is dead, Martin King dead, Rosa Parks dead, Dorothy Day dead, Lucretia Mott dead, Coretta Scott dead, Gandhi dead, Malcolm dead, James Reed dead, Viola Louisa dead. But guess what? We are their children and we are here, and it's time for us to be the remnant that can transform the nation. It's time for us to be the remnant that will work it out in the public square. And if we do, our children's children will call our names because we did not surrender. We did not give up on this democracy. We did not give up on justice. We did not give up on love, but instead we stood together and we fought to save the heart and the soul of this democracy and this world. Are you ready? If you're ready, hold your cards up. And pass those cards to the inside. Don't move. Pass them to the inside. Two people are coming down the middle aisle. We got two more things to do before you leave. They're quick. Pass them to the inside. Yara, come right here. Walk with me. You do it your way.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me.
Every card, you can say, if you can't do the civil disobedience, sign up to help. Those online, go to poorpeoplescampaign.org, www.breachrepairers, or go to the Kairos Center website. Click on Poor People's Campaign. We need 25,000 out of 355 million. Dr. King said if he could have gotten 3,000, and they did, and they made a difference. Any more cards? Anybody need cards? Now we got to ask one thing. Who's the oldest person here? Anybody here over 80? Anybody over 85? Anybody over 86, 87? Come in, my sister. Stand right there. My sister, what's your name?
My name's Marilyn Warner.
Marilyn Warner. I need to ask you to look at me just a second. Now, this is very serious because in movements you ought to ask permission of the elders. Because we're getting ready to stand on the work that you did and you and others did long before we were here. We're not acting like we're the first ones to get on the scene. But tonight, as we do at every mass meeting, Liz and I, we want to ask if we have the permission of the elders to take up this movement and to ask some of you to suit up another time because you've been through a lot of battles. But Sister Marilyn, is that right? Yes. Do we have your permission on behalf of the elders to take up this movement?
Absolutely.
Now, who's the youngest child here that can answer a question? To all the young ones, look at me. If we do this, we will be messing in your future. We may not finish it, but we will be creating something that can make things better, but it also means you may have to struggle some. I want to know from you, do we have permission from you to fight for justice and love? Do we have permission to fight to make a better world, to strive to make a better world for you to live in? Do we have your permission as young people to try to help the poor? Do you want us to help the poor? Do you want us to help people? You do? Will we have your permission? Thank you so much. Everybody, grab a hand. Who has to come up and get from the clergy? I want us to get from the clergy.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me while we're down.
This is how you get ready for moral battles.
Fighting for justice.
We're going to have to walk this thing. It's a movement, not a moment.
I want you to walk with me.
Now tonight, we're so honored that Liz and I and others that you would allow us to come. As you notice tonight, we haven't taken up an offering because at these mass meetings, we want to leave all the resources in the state. We're not trying to build a national body for repairers or for Kairos. We want everything done to be able to continue to build here state by state. You don't have a national movement by getting an address in DC. You have a national movement by nationalizing state movements. Change in America came from Birmingham up, from Selma up. You see what I'm saying? It never came that way. It came from up. There has to be we keep wanting these parties to do better. They can't do better unless there's a movement in the street, a moral movement, a movement of consciousness that changes the political climate so that they can't even do what they thought they were elected to do. And that's our job. And God, the God of known by many names, the Spirit, the moral arc of the universe, promises to be with us if we'll dare be that remnant. Liz and I want to thank each of you. I'm going to step out for some reasons. We've been on the road and preserving. I would love to shake every hand in here because I'm a hugger. But we've got to preserve our strength some. We've been on the road 2 straight months and flying back and forth. We may not ever come back here, but because it's going to be for you to hold the movement. Where's Aaron? And and we came here because you already got movement here. Where's she at? Chaplains in the harbor. Because it's not like people around here have to figure out how to do movement. And so we're just honored that you would even think about Washington and Alaska and Oregon taking up this call to transform this nation. My brothers and sisters, it is our time. Liz has told us we cannot let anybody, regardless of their political affiliation, and I don't know why she chose that text, but I was reading that this morning, so it must be the Spirit, that you can't keep letting folks say peace, 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 when there is no peace. And the systems we're running now are destroying the lives of people, especially when we know we can do better. And so, one more time, y'all, would you have folks sing it together? Join her, walk with me. And you may like say, walk with me, Spirit. God bless you tonight.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. While I'm down here, fighting for justice, I want you to walk with me. Guide my feet, Lord. Guide my feet. Guide my feet, Lord. Guide my feet. While I'm down here, fighting for justice, I want you to guide my feet.
So we thank everybody for coming, and I want to close people out with one more quote from Dr. King. He says, "The poor and dispossessed of this nation live in a cruelly unjust society. If they can be helped to take action together, They will do so with a freedom and a power that will be a new and unsettling force in our complacent national life. And as he says this, he says we're about building a freedom church, a nonviolent army of the poor, and that army is rising up to break every chain of injustice, of the lack of freedom, of poverty, of racism, of militarism, of ecological devastation. And so we thank you for being here. We thank you for answering this call, for joining in this work, and for us to work together, move forward in power and in peace until we end all of these evils, until justice is made real in all of our lives. So go home safely. Make sure that you connect with people that you've never met before you leave. And we thank the folks here at the Intellectual House and the folks that have been on this land before us for welcoming us into this place. And this is just the beginning. We'll see you all soon.